Hi there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to be using my favorite vegetable, broccoli. But we're not going to be just making a head of broccoli. We're going to be making also my favorite Chinese dish, which is beef and broccoli. So I have this gorgeous head of broccoli that I got at the farm market yesterday. It was just picked by the farmer who grows these vegetables on his farm. And I had a little piece of steak left in the freezer, and I said, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that. So we're going to make a very simple marinade for the beef, and then we're going to prepare our broccoli, make a little stir-fry sauce. I have some rice already cooked and waiting in the wings. This is all going to come together in about 20 minutes, and I hope you'll follow along. Okay, so the first step in making our beef and broccoli is to marinate our beef. And I had this little steak in the freezer, and I thought, well, this is perfect. I need to use up this steak, and I have this beautiful head of broccoli. So today is the day that steak gets used. Earlier I had it just folded over to go into a Ziploc bag, but it's just a little, is it a strip loin or a New York strip? It's nothing fancy. It was a cheap package of beef that I got at the store. I'm just going to trim away the excess fat and any pieces of gristle. And it's still a little bit frozen because that makes it easier to slice. So just trim away any extra fat or gristly bits. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to just slice this in very thin little strips, trimming off any fat as you go. So you want it nice and thin, as thin as you can get. And this doesn't have to be perfect. This is all going to be marinated. This is a fairly tender cut of steak anyway, but even the marinade will take care of any beef that's on the overly tough side. And this is about a ½ pound of steak. You don't need a whole lot. So I'm going to put that in my bowl. And now I'm going to mix up the ingredients for the marinade. Now it's time to make the marinade for our beef. I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and we'll use 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. That's going to make the beef very tender. And this is a very good ingredient to have in your pantry if you do any amount of Chinese style cooking. This is Shaoxing cooking wine. And you just need a little bit. This recipe calls for 2 teaspoons. But if you can look for this in an Asian market, or maybe your grocery store carries it, it adds a very nice, subtle flavor that ordinary cooking wine just does not. So we have 2 teaspoons of that, and 1 teaspoon of soy sauce, and 2 teaspoons of just regular oil, cooking oil. And I'm going to mix that up. You could use your hands for this, but you want the beef to be well coated in this marinade. And if it seems a little dry, you can add a splash of water. This seems pretty moist, so I'm just going to add a teaspoon of water just to help plump up the beef. And so now I'm going to just let that sit in the fridge for about an hour while I do the broccoli. And it doesn't have to sit there for a full hour, but this is something that you can do ahead. Make your rice, prepare your broccoli, because when it comes time to stir fry this together, it's only going to take a couple of minutes. So into the fridge with the marinated beef. Our meat is marinating in the fridge, and now I'm going to put together our ingredients for the stir-fry sauce. So I have 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. You could also use honey if that's your preference. Honey would be delicious in this. And I have 3/4 cup of hot water, just hot out of the tap, or if you've recently boiled a kettle, you could do that. And that's just going to help the brown sugar to dissolve. And I have a tablespoon of hoisin sauce and 2 tablespoons of soy sauce and 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. Give that a good stir. Now that looks very thin for a stir-fry sauce, and it is. So we have a tablespoon and a half of cornstarch, and I'm going to make a slurry with that. I'll just add a couple of tablespoons of cold water at the very end. So I'll show you how this comes together, but the cornstarch will thicken this and make it nice and glossy. So I'll just set this aside, and then we'll get our broccoli prepared. And here is our beautiful head of broccoli. I can't get over the size of it. It's so gorgeous. So I'm just going to trim off the ends. Some people would peel that down and also put that in. I'm not a fan, so into the compost with that. And I'm going to just trim these into florets. And I'll give these a good rinse. And depending on your head of broccoli, this was a huge one, and I'd say I'm getting about maybe 3 to 4 cups of processed broccoli out of this. And anyone who says they don't like broccoli, well, I would challenge them to eat this recipe because it makes broccoli taste absolutely spectacular. And I will rinse this, and then I'm going to soak that in some cold salty water. And then I'll also get a big pot of water boiling, and we're going to blanch this, but we'll give this a soak first just to make sure it's absolutely clean. So I've given my broccoli a rinse. I have a bowl of cold water here, and I'm just going to put in a tablespoon of salt, which is about all I have left in this jar. I need to refill it. So give that salt a little stir to dissolve it with your hands, and just transfer this broccoli in there. Let that hang out in the salt water while you get a big pot of water boiling. And some people will stir fry their broccoli just raw like this. I like to blanch mine for a minute. It gets it nice and green, and then you can shock it in a bowl of ice water. I'll show you how I do that too. That way when you have the beef cooked and all your veggies are prepared and ready to go, all you have to do is toss them in the finished sauce and serve it right away. And that way your broccoli doesn't get limp. It has that sweet spot where it's perfectly green and tender crisp, and then 1 minute more of cooking in the pan and it's ruined. This method sort of saves you from that. So I have a pot of water boiling on the stove, and I have my broccoli that's been soaking in salt water. I'm going to take a strainer here, and I'm just going to pop this quickly into my boiling water and blanch it. And I'm going to blanch it for no more than a minute. So I'm going to push that all down into the hot water and see how it immediately has turned bright green. I'm just going to put a cover on it for a second while I dump the water from this bowl. I've dumped that bowl of salt water and rinsed it out, and I've filled the bowl with cold water, and I've got a bowl of ice cubes here. So I have an ice bath waiting for my broccoli. So now that's been in there for maybe a minute. It doesn't take long. I just want it to get nice and green. We're not cooking it. And the colander that I used earlier, I'm going to have that waiting at the sink, and I'm going to quickly drain that pot of broccoli, and then I'm going to put it in the ice bath to stop it cooking right away. Drain this pot. Shake off as much of that hot water as you can, and then tip this into the ice bath. And I'll add a little bit more cold water. And when that feels like it's completely cooled down, then you can drain the broccoli and just have that waiting while you do the rest of the stir fry. So I'm just going to set this aside, and now I'm going to prepare my onions, garlic, and ginger. So the next thing we have to do is prepare our ginger and garlic and onion. And I need 3 large cloves of garlic. Even though this bulb is fairly big, the cloves are tiny, so I might use 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 cloves of garlic. And I have a small onion, so I'm just going to roughly chop this. Take off the outer peel. So I'm going to cut the onion in half and then into quarters. And then I'll just separate the layers. The heat of the pan will do this too, but I'm just helping it along a little bit. Whew, that onion is strong. Okay, now I'm going to crush these garlic cloves. Just smash them with the side of your knife. I'm just going to run my knife through them. For the ginger, cut off a piece. Take the skin off. Slice your ginger into thin slices. It's just about getting it roughly chopped very finely so that the flavor is extracted when we do our stir fry. Here's our ginger and our garlic. So I've pulled the meat out of the fridge. It's been marinating in there all this time while I've been making the stir fry sauce and preparing the broccoli and chopping our veggies. So now we're ready to cook. And I'm going to put 2 heaping tablespoons of cornstarch, maybe 3, in a dish. And I'm going to dredge the meat in this. So I'm using my hands for now because I think it's the easiest way to make sure that the beef is all coated in this cornstarch. So we're just going to toss it around. This is going to give the beef a nice crispy coating. If there are any that are stuck together, just tease them apart. There, that looks pretty good. Everything is coated in the cornstarch. Now we're going to start frying. And it's important to get all of your things out that you've prepared and just have them ready to go. We're going to be frying the beef very quickly and then removing it from the pan while we work on the vegetables. So make sure you get another clean plate to put your beef on. So I'll have that there. It's my clean plate. I'm going to turn my heat on to high. Add about 2 or 3 tablespoons of oil to the bottom of the pan. Just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. I have the oil heating over high heat, and the way you can test the oil to see if it's hot enough is just to get some water on your fingers and go like that. And if it sizzles right away, it's hot enough. Okay, that should be good now. And just one by one, you don't want to tip this whole platter full of beef in because you'll end up with all this excess cornstarch. Just shake off the excess cornstarch and put your beef gently in the pan. And we're going to let this beef fry in this shallow oil for about a minute on one side. And don't crowd your pan. I'm using a very large saute pan for this. And this is only ½ pound of steak. You want the beef to get a nice crispy coating. You don't want it to steam. You want it to get crispy. 1 minute on one side. Resist the urge to get in there and stir that around. You want it to get a nice sear. Okay, let's start flipping that over. Yeah. Give it another minute on the other side until it gets nice and crispy on the other side. And that's it for the beef. So now we can just very carefully turn off the heat. And I'm just going to set this beef to one side. And I've got a little bowl here. I'm going to pour off most of this fat. I'm going to leave maybe a tablespoon. I'm actually going to pour that off because that has crunchy cornstarch in it. But turn your heat back on. I'm just skimming a couple of tablespoons of that fat back into the pan. And now I'm going to cook those onions. And if you had a wok, this is a perfect recipe for hauling out the wok. So we're not looking to completely cook the onions, just to get a nice little bit of color on them. So now I'm going to add in my ginger and my garlic. Give that a good stir. And again, you don't want to burn your garlic. Just keep that moving. And when it starts to smell fragrant and beautiful, just turn your heat down ever so slightly. And this is another ingredient I love, chili crisp. Now, if you're not into hot and spicy things, you could leave this out. This isn't particularly, blow your head off spicy, but it adds such a wonderful flavor. I'm just going to add a little touch. My husband does not like spicy things. If I were making this just for me, I'd really dump it in there. Does that ever smell delicious? And now I'm going to put the stir-fry sauce in. The brown sugar and the soy sauce and hoisin and sesame oil. And this was the 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch that I had, and I'm just going to add an equal amount of cold water, make a little slurry, and just pour this in. Stir that around until it gets nice and thick. That looks good. Okay, back into the pan with our beef and our broccoli. And you just want to stir this around so that everything is well coated in that lovely, lovely sauce. And we're ready to eat. See, that didn't take long at all. The most labor intensive is prepping all your ingredients, getting your beef done, your broccoli done, your veggies, mixing up the sauces, and then when it comes time to put it together, it takes no time at all. So you could have all those other things done ahead of time, and supper would come together very quickly. I have some rice that I had cooking while I was marinating the beef and doing the vegetables. So we'll just put our beautiful beef and broccoli right on top, and see how blanching the broccoli ahead of time and just adding it at the last minute has helped it to retain that gorgeous green color. And the beef is hopefully nice and tender. We'll soon find out. And this will serve about 4 people, which is amazing how you can stretch a little half-pound steak into 4 servings. And I have a few little green onions. Scatter those over the top. Give it a taste. First, I want to try that beef and see how tender it is. Hopefully I don't burn my mouth. It just came right out of the pan. Very nice, not overly sweet. A nice combination of all those gorgeous Chinese flavors: hoisin, soy, the Chinese cooking wine, garlic and ginger. These flavors are fantastic. Try the broccoli. A little bit of rice, a little bit of sauce. The broccoli is perfect. It's not limp, it's not too crispy. It's got just the right amount of crunch. And that's the trick to blanching vegetables and then adding them at the last minute to a recipe. You're cooking it just to the point of perfection, stopping the cooking, and then adding it into your finished dish. If broccoli is nearing the harvest in your area, this might be a nice way to try and use it. And even for the broccoli haters in your family, I think if they tried this, they'd really like it. So thanks so much for watching. I hope I'll see you here again next week. We'll have something delicious on the go again, I'm sure. Bye for now, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.